See, I believe the recording has started. There we go. All right. So let's jump right into this. This is to be a 15-minute .NET developer overview about nopCommerce. So I can briefly talk about what nopCommerce is. We'll definitely look at what the code looks like, because as a developer, you want to see some code. And I'm also going to share more, this is probably more of an opinion of what the real value of open source is to me. And I think it would apply to many other .NET developers or developers in general that may not have looked at open source in this way. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. All right, so what is nopCommerce? It is a .NET open source solution that's probably more free than any other open source solution I've seen out there, outside of maybe a license for removing the image if you want to, or removing the disclaimer of powered by nopCommerce. Outside of that, this is definitely a open source solution that's worth checking out. When it comes to what you get out of the box, you get a storefront. So I would say in many ways it is a very common shopping cart out of the box, but there's definitely a lot of features inside the platform. So the storefront looks really nice out of the box, and as well as being responsive. And the administrator, this is actually a little bit older screenshot of the administrator, but nonetheless, the administrator itself has to manage a lot of different aspects, and it even handles all of those in a very responsive way. So some aspects of nopCommerce, it's been around a little over 10 years, 11 years. Back in 2008 in October, it was first released. And then a couple years later in 2010, there was about 5,000 active sites running nopCommerce worldwide. And all this can be found on their About Us page. These are just some of the things that I wanted to highlight from that page. In 2011, that's when the version 2.0 was released. I believe they moved from a web forms structure into MVC architecture, which is a pretty big move back then. And then in 2013, a couple years later, they implemented some pretty big features for the 3.0 release for being a multi-store and multi-vendor. So that was a pretty big release for them. In 2017, the 4.0 release, to where at a code level, things were moving towards supporting ASP.NET Core. And again, that was a pretty big milestone. And what I really like about nopCommerce is that they're not bleeding edge, but they're right on the edge of doing the right things. And they have an architecture in place that kind of sets them up for success. To where, as of 2019, I'm not sure the numbers as of today, but on what's posted on the About Us, there's 60,000 websites currently running nopCommerce worldwide. That's a pretty big milestone. So the different features you could check out within the nopCommerce site, but I would say from a developer perspective, a lot of these features are maybe what you expect out of a platform shopping cart. So when it comes to the multi-store, multi-vendor aspects, how there's a lot of attention paid to SEO and just that overall shopping cart experience, it's worth checking out more details on these features. But this is really an overview for developers, .NET developers. And when you look in the common .NET web architecture, there's a lot of things in the Microsoft stack that are applied here. There's ASP.NET Core, there was Entity Framework, I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and the primary backend is SQL Server. On the front end side, it's mostly RazorView engines, the RazorView engine, but then there's also some jQuery mixed in. There might be some movement on other frameworks, not sure, but I think nopCommerce has made the right choice over the years of not jumping into one of those other UI frameworks such as Angular, React, or Vue right away. It's good to see that space kind of settle down a little bit, and that I bet nopCommerce will be applying what makes sense there. When it comes to AutoFact and some other aspects that are utilized within the library, things are implemented in a very smart fashion. So it's best to look at a lot of these items in more of a walkthrough kind of way of where you have the application layer, the business layer, and the data access layer. And when you kind of look at things this way for the libraries, it helps a lot more to understand where these different references kind of fall into play. So from a developer perspective, we have then a little bit of a history aspect here. We had the 3.9 version go to 4.0, and that's at a time when the nopCommerce team was really preparing to go to .NET Core. And then from 4.0 to 4.1, that's when the commitment was made to actually compile to .NET Core. So I like that kind of risk approach. Less risk, the better on that kind of movement forward. It made a lot of sense to do things that way. And then from 4.1 to 4.2, that's when there was more support for running on, really support itself running on Linux, as well as within Docker containers. And the latest release, moving from 4.2 to 4.3, that's where some data access was refactored. And we'll see what that looks like here shortly under the covers. And moving to the next version, most likely it'll be a 4.4 version. I'm not really sure yet, but it's best to follow GitHub and kind of monitor those issues. I know MongoDB is high on the list. Even Postgres is kind of high. But again, it's best to follow the GitHub issues within the nopCommerce project that's out there. And most likely it'll still target 3.1. It all depends on the actual release. So let's look at some code here, and we'll look at a little bit of the solution architecture and how you can extend with plugins and customize with the different themes. So I know this slide might be hard to read if you're, even though I'm kind of sharing this up close with you, but nonetheless, for what makes up the solution, you have this common library of a NOP core project, and then you have a lot of your data access that's being handled within nop.data, that project. And the NOP services is where a lot of business logic resides. And so, yeah, you have these 3 different libraries that are central to the entire platform. You have NOP Web, which is the storefront, as well as the administrator is in that project as well. At one time, the administrator project was outside of NOP Web, to where it kind of made sense to have this in-between project, as you say, a shared project for the web side. So where you have this nop.web.framework, probably still makes sense to keep that as a separate project. That way it does allow for the possibility of another site to be put up around it and have some common standards. But nonetheless, I believe this was initially created as a common project, so NOP Web, and at the time NopAdmin was shared. But again, it's one website. There's a handful of test projects that are out there as well that are worth checking out. And out of the box, there are a good handful of plugins that you can also choose from. And there are more plugins out on GitHub. And of course, you'll see in the marketplace, there's definitely many more plugins that could be purchased or downloaded for free. So in looking at this architecture, when it comes to the front end, there's really nothing crazy going on here. In other words, it's your common MVC architecture to where a user makes a request to a controller and a controller instantiates a model, and then the controller will return a view or a page, and that view or page will have reference to that model that was instantiated by the controller. So what I guess what I'm trying to iterate here is that on the front end side, it's your typical MVC architecture, which is great and easy to understand. But that controller has to get its data from somewhere, and its logic in many ways. So that controller will call into the NOP services library, not a separate service. This is, again, running all under one application instance. So the NOP services library will have something called a service or a factory, something along the lines that's going to then basically return or, not directly populate, but nonetheless work with domain entities that would then get populated into the model. So what I really like about this architecture is that the separation of concerns is in many ways, very clear from many other architectures I've seen. Well, that service needs to get its data from somewhere. So typically from the database, and implements a repository pattern to access that data. That repository pattern will then work with a domain mapper, at least what used to be called a mapper. Now it's called a builder within this current release of 4.3. And that mapper will then populate the domain entity. So there's no duplication of data and entities. You basically just have this mapper or builder that applies the rules to those entities that are basically what the database represents, and those get filled into the model. So again, I really like this separation of concerns within this whole architecture at a library level. So let's look at a little bit of code here, and even how nopCommerce has evolved some. So if we look at the repository, matter of fact, I just had a discussion with someone about this prior to the meetup. So let's say we're looking at the customer service class that's in the service layer, and we have this get customer by ID, and we have this method that's going to go to the repository to get that customer by ID. So that is implemented through an interface. So a dependency injection is heavily used within this entire framework. And that get by ID is really just a method off of that interface. So if we take a closer look at that iRepository interface, we see that standard, that contract, I guess you'd say, what an interface is, represent that particular method and other methods such as insert, update, delete, and so on for the repository. So there's this EF repository, and again, this was, the current version is 4.3, and Entity Framework has actually gone away. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But nonetheless, there was an EF repository to represent Entity Framework, and when it came to get by ID, this is actually probably an older screenshot because I don't think that comment is there anymore. But when it comes to get by ID, it was basically doing an entity.find under the covers. If you look a little closer within that EF repository, we see that we have this table property, and that table property really just points to this entity's property of type IDB set. So something that's more entity framework specific, but table itself is pretty generic. Let's take a look at the service layer and see how this particular query is actually implemented. So here we are back at in the customer service, and we have the get customer by GUID, and we notice that we have this link type query. You might be thinking it's a link to entity framework query, but it's more of a link to objects type query. And since we have this table property being exposed off the repository, that allows us to create this query that gets projected to entity framework to then handle that query to the database itself. So this is a pattern that I see it being taught a lot more, but nonetheless, I think this is a pretty cool pattern that even when I first started looking at nopCommerce, I don't know if I even really saw the value of it until we started to look at the 4.3 version. Let's take a look at what's changed. And I guess that's the best part. Not much has changed at that level. So where we had entity framework, being the data access layer, within the 4.3 version, it was switched out to use link to DB. And link to DB was identified as, there definitely could be an argument of, hey, why didn't you just do more than entity framework, or maybe why didn't you switch to another ORM? But nonetheless, link to DB looks like it has more or better performance than entity framework. I'm sure that's why the decision was made. And not only that, the nopCommerce team not only wants to support SQL Server, but they also want to support MySQL, which is also available within the 4.3 version, as well as other data stores that are projected in future versions, such as MongoDB and Postgres, which are very popular. So there's more to be checked out on Link to DB. I think what they highlight for what this on their page on what the niche, I guess you'd say, what this ORM provides, it's in my opinion, it's kind of like right in between what entity framework is and what you would find in a micro ORM such as Dapper or Massive and Petapoco. And not only that code that I showed you didn't have to change on that query. So now the query is basically getting projected to a different provider. I think it's just called data provider now, for Link to DB, its default provider. So it was a nice, safe way of moving forward. All right, so when it comes to nopCommerce, there's a pretty rich marketplace that you could check out. And when it comes to training around creating plugins and themes, which is what's available in the marketplace, this course is getting a little outdated, but nonetheless, there is a course out on Pluralsight. It covers, I believe, maybe the 3.6 or 3.7 version of creating plugins for nopCommerce. By far, a course is needed. An updated course is needed. But when it comes to the basics of creating a plugin, a lot of this still translates today. Some file names have changed a little bit here and there, but the overall flow of how you create a plugin and how it gets loaded is pretty much the same. And in those regards, I would say this course is still the date when it comes to the program flow of creating a plugin for nopCommerce. And that difference between plugins and themes, you have the front end, they're more theme based, and then you have the plugins that are more about business logic and even data manipulation, where maybe you want your plugin to create a table and be able to store some extra data there. You can do that in the plugin model and the deployment structure. Themes themselves are really just a pattern of the different CS HTML files that are in their own folder, and then you can choose what theme you want from the administrator of nopCommerce itself. All right, so what's the real value of open source? I'm going to kind of fly through this a little bit since I'm going a little long here. So this is probably more in my opinion, but a lot of people, I think, should look to open source when it comes to understanding full stack development as a developer. You might look at open source as a secondary income. That makes a lot of sense. But I think more importantly, every developer should have some kind of reference architecture that they're looking at outside of their day job. So nopCommerce for a .NET developer, I think, is probably the best architecture I've seen for a .NET developer to really understand all the different aspects to become a better developer. All right, so real quick here on the different coding schools you see out there when it comes to becoming a full stack developer, you'll see that they'll have different tracks, like it being a Java full stack developer or a .NET full stack developer. So, you know, there are different stacks that you could focus on and what full stack you want to be in. Now there is some crossover there sometimes, but they just have to deal with within an organization. But nonetheless, it's good to be aware of the stacks. You'll see different diagrams out there when it comes to being a full stack developer, but really what it boils down to after doing this for so many years is that as a developer, you're expected to do so many different aspects now: front end, back end, database development, automation, even mobile side, to where you have to think about all these different aspects as a developer. And it's not so easy just to focus on front end nowadays. You're kind of expected in many ways to know at least a little bit of something about all these different areas of software development. So when it comes to becoming a full stack developer, I recommend you first choose a stack. Then you also want to choose a learning platform to kind of keep you up to speed on that stack. And the third thing is find an open source solution that kind of helps you learn more within that stack. So in this example with nopCommerce, we have the Microsoft stack of .NET. We have I'm going to show, we have Pluralsight, could be a learning platform for yourself. I just use Pluralsight a lot. I have no freebie codes or anything like that. I just a big advocate because I use it. And then of course, nopCommerce is a good example of open source. Let's go through these briefly and wrap this up. So if you wanted to see the different stacks, here's kind of my view on pulling a lot of that together. And the one thing to kind of notice, like when you look at, let's say, the .NET stack, it's driven heavily by a given company. So like Microsoft, outside of the languages like C# and so on, and even the implementations on the desktop and web client, they're basically trying to guide you towards a different platform, maybe something in Azure, to kind of fulfill that stack. And Oracle in the Java space, even Google for what they're doing out there with Go and Google Cloud. Now that I call the JavaScript stack, or more the open source languages out there, I call that more of a community stack. But nonetheless, it's good to kind of focus on a stack. That way you kind of compare and contrast the different languages and tools, and just even recognize the culture around those communities. Of the learning platforms, I heavily suggest just getting something like a subscription. Think of Pluralsight as your new Netflix, something like that. LinkedIn Learning is great. Code Academy is good. I know a lot of people use Udemy for an a la carte type way of getting courses. There's a lot of great free stuff on YouTube for sure, and even Channel 9 if you're looking at the Microsoft stuff. All right, so when it comes to the different open source solutions, for what's out there overall, you have WordPress with WooCommerce on the e-commerce space. You have Magento that got purchased by Adobe for a whole bunch of money, but nonetheless, it's been around a while. It's a certain development stack. You have Broadleaf in the Java space, but of course, as a .NET developer, I was more interested in the different .NET open source solutions, and there's a good handful of them out there. And in looking at all these different architectures, even where I kind of back in the day worked with .NET New quite a bit, I still kind of find myself finding nopCommerce is this great architecture to really dive into. And to wrap up some opportunities here, I mean, maybe the obvious one is you can put a plugin or a theme in the marketplace as a developer. It's a nice side income or primary income. You get certified in nopCommerce. They have a certification. You can take a test and become certified. You could be a store owner. You can actually apply it for yourself. You can set up a drop shipping site or even some downloadable content as a developer. And lastly, I do think that the real value of having or diving deep in an open source project like nopCommerce is for you to really have this reference architecture. So when it comes to these different job interviews, whatnot, you're not so much talking about your day job and giving away secrets. And I also don't recommend talking about your own open source project. Let's say if you're creating your own ORM, something like that, you have to be very careful of that when it comes to going to job interviews. Having this third option of talking about an architecture like nopCommerce, you can talk objectively about something that you've been studying, and you can talk about and give the examples of dependency injection and how to implement an ORM. I think there's some great aspects to this software as being not only just implemented as a storefront, but as a reference architecture for a .NET developer. So by far, my advice to .NET developers is go to GitHub, download it today, check it out, and the 4.3 version was recently released. It is touted as the fast version of nopCommerce ever, and I can see why when I look at the code improvements. And also it does support MySQL, and it compiles the .NET Core 3.1. In our first meetup for the nopCommerce Global Meetup, we did cover a lot of those updates, as well as have a Q&A with Andre. And I have this NopTube that'll take you directly to the nopCommerce YouTube channel to make it a little easier to find it. So the virtual meetup is third Tuesday of every month. And if you do want to have a little bit more of a walkthrough of the architecture, I was at Microsoft and recorded on their Channel 9 platform. This is also available out on YouTube. It's not too hard to find. I believe if you just even Google nopCommerce, you'll find this video in the search results. All right, let's wrap this up. So the official site's nopcommerce.com. Online training, Nop Academy. Working towards having that launched this fall. If you have interest about that, feel free to email me on that. I have a nop.docs will take you to the documentation, or you can find it underneath the nopCommerce site. Again, YouTube channel. There's a lot of good content out on there as well. And we also have the monthly meetup. Meetup will take you to the meetup as well. So yes, if you want a copy of this presentation, just email me. If you want to present at a meetup, sponsor a meetup, training consulting, and more importantly, if you have any questions or feedback about this, please send me an email at john@nopacademy.com. All right, that is all I have. I went probably a little longer. I did over by a few minutes. I'm gonna have to trim that down for the next meetup. So Atul, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to just keep the recording going. And I will stop. I'm going to stop presenting. And maybe I'll look at chat, see if there's any questions. I wasn't looking at it all while I was talking. Let's see. Not sure how to respond to that particular question. Dive into that a little more. Anyway, Atul, I'll monitor the chat for you. That way if something comes up timely, I'll go ahead and jump in. Otherwise, I'm going to turn off my video and mic. That way you can kind of take the stage as it were.
No problem.
And if don't feel like you have to turn on your camera. That's totally up to you. Sometimes, your internet speed may benefit from not having the camera on. It's totally up to you if you want your camera on.
Yeah, actually, I don't see the option of turning on camera. I don't know. I mean, this is the first time using this Microsoft Teams.
Gotcha. Well, we can hear you. That's what's important. And hopefully we can then see your screen. That'll be the next important thing.
Yeah, yeah. So I was looking at the screen sharing options, and I may need maybe your help from that when
Oh,
sharing my
sure.
screen.
Tell you
Yeah,
what,
no
I'm
problem.
gonna.
So let me
I
start from greeting everyone else. Yeah, yeah, please
do.
continue.
Do you want me to share my screen and show you what needs to be done?
Mm, yeah, that will be
Okay.
good.
Sure. Hold on. All right. So what you should see when you kind of hover over this area,
Mm-hmm.
you'll get this toolbar,
Yep,
and you should then see the third button from the left or right, to where you
yep.
could then click on the drop down and then select your screen to be shared. You can also share a window, but I'd recommend just sharing one of your screens if you have two or more.
All right, got it.
And the
Uh,
video option is right here as well if you wanted to use it, as well as muting and unmuting yourself.
it's actually disabled for me. I don't know why.
Oh, weird.
Yeah,
Okay. But you
no
can share
problem.
your screen?
Yeah, I can do. So
Okay, good.
first of all, hello everyone, and I see Andre
And
is also in this meeting.
I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. That way you can share. Okay.
No problem.
All right.
All right. So hi
All yours.
Andre. Uh, I hope you are doing good, and I can see some of my team members have also joined this meeting. So hello to everyone. Today we'll be talking on how to install nopCommerce on a Windows server. But before that, I'll like to raise few things that John actually mentioned in his talk. So nopCommerce, yeah, it's have the most beautiful code that we have seen so far, especially me, right? And it's really a good open source project, and any developer can easily learn from nopCommerce the way they have maintained the code, right? And it's really very easy to get started with, and you can develop anything using nopCommerce. I mean, any kind of website using nopCommerce, and it's always updated with the latest tech. So these are the very few highlights about the nopCommerce. I'm sharing my screen. Just let me know if you can see. So John, is my screen visible?
Yep, I can see it.
Great, great. So I'll just share some of the company highlights about our company. So we are NopAdvance, and I am the founder and CEO of NopAdvance. So we are the #1 goal solution partner in nopCommerce Partners Directory. This is our website, nopadvance.com, and we are working with few companies like Vodafone. So this is a website which we have developed for the Vodafone recently. I just wanted to show that to everyone. Now let us move forward with our today's session. So this is a Windows server that I have, and it's a fresh Windows server. I have just installed SQL Server on this Windows server, and IIS is also installed on this server. So there are a few prerequisites that we need to have before we install nopCommerce. So we need to have the IIS. We need to have this .NET Core hosting bundle. So you can download the .NET Core hosting bundle from this place. I'll just minimize this one. So when you go to the .NET Core download page, right? So make sure when you're installing something for the IIS, so we need to select this hosting bundle. Otherwise, it won't work on IIS. So I have just installed this ASP.NET Core Runtime 3.1.6 hosting bundle on my IIS on this Windows server. Right. And of course, we need this MS SQL server. So I am using an express version of MS SQL server for today's demonstration. And before that, I'll give you a highlight on how to configure your IIS to install a website. So you can simply open your server manager dashboard and then click on add roles and features, click next, and it's a role based and feature based installation. Right, when we click next, we select a server from the server pool. Now over here, we need to have this web server which installs the IIS. And in this web server, we should make sure that we have this. This is the very important part that most of us, miss always. So we should have this ASP.NET 3.5 and 4.6 installed under web server application development. Uh, be- if you don't install this thing, right, the IIS will install, but the website will give you an error that will be 500.19. Right, so this should be a most common error for everyone. So unless and until you install this ASP.NET 3.5 and 4.6, it will keep giving you that error. So this was about the IIS installation, the proper IIS installation on your Windows server. Once you complete the IIS installation and you have all these three things installed properly on your system, you can then simply install the nopCommerce. So today we will see how do we install the nopCommerce. So I have this. So I downloaded the latest copy of nopCommerce, no source code, 64 bits Windows, right? And I renamed it to nopCommerce 430, and I have placed it inside the C drive and etpub triple W root on and over here. So I'll just copy the name, right? And then I'll go to my IIS. So this is the IIS of this server. So I'm simply clicking sites, right click, add website. I will simply fill in the site name, and in the physical path, I just need to select the directory in C, inetpub, triple W root, and nopCommerce 430. So this is the nopCommerce 430 no source version. Now, if we need to bind this website to a domain, right? So we need a domain. So I already have a domain which I have mapped over here. So this is the domain which I'll be using today. This is nop430demo.nopadvance.com, and I have pointed the A record of this domain to this server. Right. So this is my Windows server, and I have pointed a record of this domain to this Windows server. Now I'll go back to the IIS and I'll put this domain name over here, and I'll click OK. So that's it. It has configured the nopCommerce on my Windows Server IIS. When I'll click Browse, it will simply open this website. We just need to wait unless and until this loads. So you see, we got this error because of the permissions. So I'll go back to the IIS. I'll right click the website over here and then edit permissions. I'll go to the security tab, edit IIS users. I'll choose this IIS users user role, and then I'll give it full permission for now and apply. So giving the permissions, the proper permissions to this IIS users is mandatory. Otherwise, the website will not be accessible on via IIS. So I have just given the full permission to this. I'll go here and then I'll refresh the website. Now it should load. So we see it was really easy to come up with this installation page. I will simply leave it as it is. I'll type the username and the password, create the sample data. So I'll use Microsoft SQL Server, create database if it doesn't exist, and the SQL Server name. So we can simply find the SQL Server name from here. So we connect to this server. I think it's really small. Text. So I'll simply fill in it here. The database name, I'll name it nopCommerce 430, and the username of SQL Server and the password, and install. This will start installing the nopCommerce in the Windows IIS server.
So, Atul, I have a quick question while we're kind of waiting for this to install.
No problem.
When it comes to that email address, do you can it really just be any email address, or is it kind of important to think about what address you want to put there when it comes to really setting up a site? I understand this is more for demo purposes, but
Yeah.
how much thought do you think, when it comes to that email that's for the
So
admin?
yeah. So the nopCommerce creates a customer using that email address while installing the nopCommerce. So if you want to use your actual email, for example, my email is atul@nopadvance.com. So I can simply put that email while installing nopCommerce. So it will automatically become an administrator email address. Otherwise, you can have any email address and then you can simply change it from the admin dashboard of the nopCommerce.
Oh, I got you. So really just getting past the install, you could put anything there. And then
Yes.
but when it comes to that email address itself, do you usually just maybe use like a forwarded account, or do you actually use like an active account email?
You can use any account, so
Mhm,
it does not matter. You can use any email address. You can even use the email address that does not exist. For example, this admin@yourstore.com, this does not exist, right? And
mhm.
we are using this email address, so it does not do any authentication against your Active Directory. Right. So
Right,
nopCommerce just do the authentication against your database. So this email address is in your database, right? And it will find it and it will log you in. Similarly, I'm logging in right now.
right. All right. Sounds good.
So I'm into the store. I'll simply save this right now. Now you see that I have some warnings on this page, right? And let's see what are those warnings. So it says that the plugins which are not in use, I can simply, delete them. So here is one thing that I wanted to share with you is upon installing nopCommerce have so many plugins over here, right? During installation, you can simply, the first thing is you can simply delete these plugins, right? So this won't be installed. But there is another way where you can simply disable, some plugin during install. For example, I want to disable this plugin during install. So I'll go to this plugin, right? Copy its system name, and then I will go to the nopCommerce directory, and I'll find app-settings.json file. So in app-settings.json file, if you edit it, right? So there is a setting in app-settings.json that plugins ignored during installation. You see this highlighted in the green color. So plugins ignored during installation. If you simply put the system name of all those plugins which you don't want to get installed during installation, you can simply put the system name of all those plugins. Otherwise, you can leave this blank. If you want all of the plugins installed, get installed during installation, or you can simply delete the plugin from the plugin directory. But it's a good idea to use what nopCommerce provides out of the box. So we have this website over here set. I'll go to the store settings, right? I'll show you some really necessary configurations. So I'll go to this store settings, and I see that these host values are not updated. So it's always better if you update these host values. So I'll just put this in over here, right? The default language, you can simply leave everything, right the way it is. Now, we don't have an SSL right now, right? So this is the most important thing. I mean, one of the important thing that users struggle with. So how to set up an SSL? So for this demonstration, I will use let's encrypt OpenSSL, right? And I'll simply open it over here because I have that in my in this server. So I'll simply execute this file. It creates me an idea where, okay, so I'm creating a new SSL over here, and it says it us to choose the websites on the IIS. So this is the site which is one. So I'll simply choose. it saves me an email address. I'll simply write any email address. Okay, so let us close this. We will go back to this window, agree with the terms. So now this is creating a free SSL for me, and people who don't want to invest in the SSL, right, can use this free SSL as well. This is active for the next 3 months, I think, right? And when the SSL is installed, right, let us check if the SSL is really installed. I'll go here and I will refresh this section. Just a minute. So you see the SSL binding is now over here. So on the port 443, we have a binding. And if we go to the bindings, right, you see that there is a binding for this port 3 already. And if you edit it, we can see that there is an SSL certificate over here, right? And to set up an SSL, you can simply follow these steps. You simply have to install the SSL certificate using your SSL authority or SSL provider tools, and you simply have to select that SSL certificate, type in the host name, which is the website URL without HTTP or HTTPS, right? And you need to check this checkbox, which is require server name indication, right? And you need to click on OK, right? This will install the SSL with the port 443 active on your Windows Server IIS. Now we'll close this, right? And we will simply click this thing, SSL enabled, and then I'll click on save and continue. Now we'll see that the website will start listening on the SSL itself. So we can see that the website has been installed on the SSL as well, and there is a valid certificate. So we see that this certificate is valid for this domain, and it's from Let's Encrypt, and it's valid up to this date. Right. So we have this SSL setting right now over here, and I'll close this. So apart from this, we'll check few more things. So here we have simply installed the nopCommerce on our IIS, and the website is up and running. So it took less than 30 minutes, right? So my main agenda of this demonstration was to tell that nopCommerce is really easy to get started with. You can simply host and run a nopCommerce website within 30 minutes. It will not take more time because most of the people feel that it's really easy to use a WooCommerce or Magento or Shopify website, but nopCommerce is really easy to install and start with. So okay, so we will see what is Google PageSpeed, what does Google PageSpeed tells about this website. So I'll go here, Google PageSpeed, I'll put this domain and we'll analyze it. So we can see, okay, so I think there is a language thing. All right, so we can see that on the mobile, it says 87%, on the desktop, it says 96% right now, right? But Google PageSpeed Insights can, keeps changing sometimes due to their analyzing patterns, right? So it is still 97. Okay, it's 1 point up on the desktop, and the mobile is 86. Now let us see what things we can do to get these ranks on a higher side. So we can simply go to the general settings. And there are a few settings which we can simply enable, right? So we'll go here in this minification area. We'll simply enable JavaScript minification and bundling and the CSS minification and bundling. This response compression is already true, which is really good because the HTML is compressed. It uses gzip, as well, right? So once we save this, so the website will, and you don't forget to clear cache after saving this, right? And when again we'll check this in the Google page split, it will obviously go up. So you see on the mobile, it's now 93, and on the desktop, it's near to 98, right? So this is the thing that we see after compressing the response and switching on the minification and bundling for JS and CSS. There are a few more settings, which is over here. So if you do not add products very frequently, then I'll suggest to check this thing where you simply load all search engine friendly names on the startup, right? And so this will minimize the time of loading the SEO friendly names during a startup, right? And once you click enable this setting, you need to press save, clear cache, and sometimes it works weird on different servers as per my experience. So we simply do the restart application whenever we do this kind of settings. I mean, whenever we change this kind of settings. All right, so we'll go to the public store and see it loads perfectly. All right, it's here. So we have this public store over here, all up and ready with this SSL, and we'll check the Google page speed again. How does it affect us after enabling that setting? So on the mobile, we are 95, and on the desktop, we are 98. So it gives us the better result, right? Now, there are a few other tips. If you want to change the logo, we can simply go here and upload a file. I already have a logo on my desktop, so I'll use that and click on save. So you have this logo over here, right? And if you want to change the theme, right? So it's really easy to set up a website using nopCommerce. So I have this theme over here. I'll simply copy it and I'll paste it inside the theme folder over here. Okay, it's here copied. I'll simply go to the website, refresh it, and I can see that the theme is here. I can simply select this theme and click on save. So the theme is activated. As you see, I mean, the theme is now applied, and we are able to see the changes of this theme. So the nopCommerce setup on the Windows server is really easy. We just need to have this IIS installed, the .NET Core hosting bundle installed, and the MS SQL server. So these three things and the steps that I mentioned, we can easily install the nopCommerce anywhere, and you can access this website from anywhere in the world. It's on a public domain, right? And that's it about the nopCommerce installation on a Windows server. Hey, John.
Hey, yeah, I was just say that was a lot of great kind of just little hidden details when it comes to just getting a site out there. Let me check the chat real quick, see if there's anything particular to this. Um, one question that I have, I'm not finding really any specific questions yet for what you just presented. Oh wait, I do see one. Well, anyway, when it comes to just kind of launching a site, is there any other aspects that let's say you have a new client and they're wanting to push their site out there as soon as possible. Are there any other aspects in the admin that you kind of maybe turn off by default? So let's say like if you scroll down right now for what's available, um, for like when it comes to the blogging feature or even showing featured products or even showing products at all. Um, are there sometimes any other aspects that when it comes to your client just wanting to get their site out there and not turn on so much right away? Is there any kind of aspects that you've dealt with there with your clients on how much you turn on when you first install or first deploy?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of settings in nopCommerce. For example, if you don't want the blogs to be available, you can simply go here in the configuration settings and click go to the blog settings, and you can simply turn off the blog from here. So this will turn off the blog for you. And if you go to on this website, right, the blog feature is not available anywhere so far. If you don't need the news, let's say the news section, right, you can simply go to the news settings over here, all right, and you simply disable the news, click save, and refresh the website. So the news are gone, right? Similarly, if you want to turn off the community poll, right, you can simply turn off the community poll from the settings as well. Right, so for each and everything, nopCommerce have got different settings. If you don't, if you cannot find a setting, right? For me, let's say I don't remember exactly where the community, how to disable the community, this community poll, right? So I'll simply go to all settings. This for advanced users, of course. I'll search community over here. So no data available. So I'll write Paul, no data available over here. So it means that there is no setting for the community Paul. So what you can do is you see this Pauls over here, right? And you can simply go edit and delete this Paul, right? So if it's not there, so nothing will be displayed. That's it. Right. So that's it about the nopCommerce setup. I mean, whenever a client comes on board to us with a simple and basic requirement that they want a website, using nopCommerce. So the first question from our side is usually, okay, so you need a nopCommerce website. So do you need on a Windows server or a VPS or on a Azure machine, right? So we gather the server requirements first. The second question is, what sort of plugins are you looking for? The client gives us the plugin list, and we find the plugin in the nopCommerce marketplace first. If the plugin is not available, then we say client that this plugin is not available. Do you want us to make something like this? And then we ask customer to choose a theme. So nop templates theme are the most effective ones whenever a client with a low budget comes, right? So because of their budget thing, NOP template themes are the most, are the best way to get a nopCommerce website up and ready within few hours, because they gives a lot of plugins, a useful set of plugins with their themes, right? So usually most of the client choose NOP template themes as well, right? So after gathering all this data, we also gather the data. For example, do you need blogs, do you need polls, do you need news, right? What shipment provider you will be using, right? What discount settings are you looking for? What text providers and categories are are you willing to set up in your store? So all these things we need to configure, right? And the payment plugins as of course. So once we gather all the all information from customer, it usually takes just few hours to set up a website. The most time is consumed in setting up a Windows server. If it's a new Windows server, for example, this Windows server is totally new machine, right? And it took me around, I'll show you. I mean, this totally new machine, right? And it took me around, 1.5 hours to set up this Windows server perfectly for to host the nopCommerce website, because I had to configure the IIS, right? I had to set up the SQL server, right? And then I had to download and install the .NET Core hosting bundle for the .NET Core. So after installing all these three things, right, I am ready to install a nopCommerce website. And once we install this nopCommerce website, we simply configure the SSL. And after configuring the SSL, we set up rest of the things like payment methods, text providers and categories, shipping methods, themes, plugins, etc.
Thanks. So I have one other kind of question that I want to kind of pull a question from the chat. When it comes to setting up a store, do you find your clients are wanting their nopCommerce site as something like, let's say, store.theirdomain.com? Or are you finding that they also want their homepage, their www.domain.com to be nopCommerce as well? Which have you found to be more common for, let's say, a small, medium-sized organization wanting to primarily get out a nopCommerce site to sell product, but they might be concerned about having their homepage, their www, being nopCommerce itself? What have you found in your experience?
So I can say so far almost all of our customers are going with the actual domain, so not on a subdomain. All of the customers who are coming to set up a nopCommerce website for them, they give us the actual domain names, the parent domain names, not the subdomain. Only few, I think, have this subdomain thing, and they usually run multiple stores. For example, one store for the retail customers and the second one for the wholesale customers. So most probably in this scenario, or if they already have a website, for example, let's say NopAdvance.com is our company's website, and if we want to host the store on the store.nopadvance.com, so we can do it that way. But it's a very less common thing.
That makes sense. All right, I'm going to pull a couple of questions from the chat, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. One of them is that, and that's at the bottom of the chat. Feel free to kind of go to the chat window if you'd like. The way you
I
would, yeah. So if
I
you
actually
hover over,
cannot see the chat window over here.
oh, you can
Yeah, I
actually.
mean,
If you go, let's see, if you hover over,
so I think I need to get rid of this first.
yeah, if you pull over your window for Teams,
So this is
and
my
go to your,
Teams window.
there you go.
Okay.
Yeah, and go select that first one.
Yes, so I cannot see the chat
Oh,
window over here. Yeah,
go ahead and click on the ellipsis. Yeah, one more over next to the participants. No,
this
the
is
other.
hang up.
Yeah, don't hang up. Click on that one right there.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
you
I
don't see
don't see the
chat.
chat.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's interesting. Okay, don't worry about that then. How about
yeah,
if I go ahead and share my screen, and that way you can see some of these chat questions.
no problem.
All right. Actually, let's do something that's a little easier to read. Hold on. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. All right, so I just kind of am throwing, because it's kind of hard to read if I just show the chat itself. So I pulled over a handful of things that were at the top. Let me go ahead and pull over one that was kind of at the bottom of the chat. I'm going to put that down here at the bottom. Can you see this okay? I can zoom in a little
Okay.
bit more.
Yep. It's fine.
Cool.
I can see this.
All right, so what is the name of the tool that you use to create the SSL certificate to encrypt it? Well, for encryption on the Windows server. What was the name of the tool?
So yeah, so that tool is WinAcme. So that's actually I downloaded it from the Let's Encrypt website. So this is actually WinAcme for the Let's Encrypt. It gives you an ability to add free SSL certificates to your website.
You said that was WinAcme?
Yes, win.acme.
I'm sorry, admin or Acme?
ACME, Acme.
I thought, okay,
Yeah.
cool. All right, here's another question. I know this is a pretty bold one, but maybe you could just talk about your experience. So he's asking, would you be able to show the upgrade from 4.2 to 4.3? But I'm sure we don't, I mean, that's something you're really prepared for, and nonetheless, it might kind of go way beyond time. But nonetheless, have you tried that upgrade process from 4.2 to 4.3?
Yeah, I mean, that's really easy to upgrade as website from 4.2 to 4.3. So we have done a couple of websites, I think maybe more than 20 in last since the 4.3 has released. So we have upgraded more than 20 websites since then from from actually not from 4.2 only, but from 3.2 to 4.3, and some of them websites were from 4.2 to 4.3 as well. So it's all about you need to follow the upgrade guidelines from the nopCommerce team. It's very neat and clean. So the first thing you need to do is to copy the content folder of your nopCommerce website to a different or a separate location. So the content folder is something that all you need, right? Rest everything, you need the upgraded code of the nopCommerce 4.3, right? You need the plugins if you are using any third-party plugins. So you need to ask vendors to send you the 4.3 upgraded plugin for your nopCommerce website. You need to run the database migration script, which is already available on the GitHub repository of nopCommerce under release tabs and on the nopCommerce website as well. So you simply need to run those upgrade scripts. And I will suggest to do a dry run before you push it, before you run that on your production, right? So we always maintain this habit. We always, ask our customers, or if the customer cannot have one, then we do it on our servers. We download the copy of database backup. We upgrade the database backup from the nopCommerce, let's say from 4.2 to 4.3, to make sure it doesn't breaks up. And we set up a development website, right? Basically a staging site, and we simply copy everything over there. So the 4.3 site, all the plugins, right, and the content folder, and we make sure to change. You should make sure to have this database connection string file and the plugins install plugins file, right, in under app underscore data folder. So once everything is set up, we simply verify if the website is working correctly, then we move to the production. So the next step is to move the production, right? So this is what we do every time if someone comes to us for an nopCommerce website upgrade.
Yeah, that makes sense to play it safe like that.
Yep.
So there was another question put in, which we actually, it was really the same question I had. Ironically, we were thinking the same thing. And that's where you basically said you find a lot of companies still going for just whatever that domain is versus,
Oh yeah, yeah.
the,
We have
Mhm.
done this we have done this, and just give me a second. I actually don't remember the domain name, because there are a lot of websites they have made. So yeah, we have made this kind of websites where the customers need uh, a website, and they want to use nopCommerce, but they don't want to use the e-commerce functionality of nopCommerce. So to do that, we simply do not add the products on the website, or
Hmm.
or if we have products somewhere, right? So we simply do not display the products on the home page, right? So you can, nopCommerce have a mini CMS which is called topic pages in nopCommerce. So using topic pages, you can add as many content pages on your website. You can bind them to the main menu or the footer menus, even though you can use the category page as a topic page, because the category page also have an HTML editor similar to a topic page. So let's say you use a category page as a topic page, and then under that category page you have a product that you want to display. So you can use your website both way, as an e-commerce or a partial e-commerce and a content specific website, just using nopCommerce. So you don't have to use the products and categories, all those things. So when you remove the products and categories from your website, it becomes a content specific website only, right? And you can
Right.
use topic pages for that.
So that's where, and that's kind of, this is close to my question. My guess, my question was really more specific to, a lot of times your top level domain, it's probably going to get 10 times more hits and traffic than maybe your store level aspects. So that's what I was just curious that from your experience, do you feel like, nopCommerce itself is very well suited to be a top level domain, even if it is almost like a landing page initially, um, and then you could have your store level domain, or basically have it
So
all in one.
yeah, so nopCommerce is very good in terms of SEO, right? So the SEO standards are very well followed in nopCommerce. And if I heard from many customers who switched from WooCommerce or Shopify and Magento and many others like, BigCommerce and OpenCart. So there are numbers of e-commerce platforms out there in different, languages. So when they moved to the nopCommerce in .NET, right. So their comment was really good that they are getting much more better SEO than before in nopCommerce, and all of them are pretty happy.
Yeah, that makes sense. Here's another question. If I wanted to customize Nop, is it best to always make a plugin? I like how he says always, like a plugin, or can I modify the actual code base in the example scenario you've encountered?
Yeah, so it depends upon how complex is your website going to be after you launch it. So if there are a lot of features, or there are a lot of code changes, I mean, for example, if you are overwriting a lot of functionalities in nopCommerce, it is always recommended to modify the code from based on my experience. But if you are simply looking to add a new module in the nopCommerce, right, and there are not so many new modules, then it's better to use a plugin. Or if your store is not a very complex one, then it's better to use a plugin. So the answer actually depends upon how complex is your website and how many features are you looking for, and of course what type of features. If the feature that you are looking for overrides a nopCommerce code, right, and there are a lot of features, then it's better not to use a plugin, because the dependency injection will make your website run slow.
Makes sense. Let's say I scrolled back. Here's another question. Um, Maybe let's take a few more, but nonetheless, here's another one. How can we set up emails? Like we want to send a new order confirmation email to our customers. Do we need to configure Exchange Server first? So overall, maybe what are some approaches that you have found when it comes to having emails that are almost like dedicated to your storefront?
Yes, so whenever we want to configure an email, of course, we need to have an email address with us, and the email, host values with us, right? And then I can quickly share my screen again and maybe show how to set up an email, or from where exactly we can set up an email, or right, John?
So you say that again? You want to go ahead and show something?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and share my screen again.
Okay, I'll
So
stop.
here we are on the nopCommerce website, and I'm going here in the admin in the configuration email accounts, right? So we have this default email account over here. Hello,
Yep, I see it.
am I still there?
Yeah, I still hear you. You still hear me?
Hello.
Yep, we hear you. You may not hear us.
Uh,
Oh, we still hear you.
hey, I think it's back now.
Yeah, we still hear you.
Yeah, so I think there was a problem. Maybe I don't know.
That's
I'll
okay.
share my screen again. Yeah, I'll
Go
share
right
my
ahead. Yeah,
screen
we
again.
were able to hear you the whole time.
Okay, all right. So you see this email configuration screen. It's under admin configuration email accounts. So you simply have to put your email address over here, the display name for whatever the display name you want to put with. For example, normally people do it like this. So not like this. So normally people do it this way. For example, Atul Rungta. So instead of doing this, you simply write the email address over here, and whatever display name you want to use, you can simply have it here, right? And so test store, the host SMTP details, the port number. If it's on an unsecured port, use 25. Otherwise, if it's a Gmail, I think it's 445 and 587. So based on the your configuration from your email provider, you need to put the port over here. The username, it can be your email address, and the password. If you want to use SSL, simply check this and click on save and edit continue while adding a new email, right? So once you add an email account, you can simply go here and send a test email, right? And once you receive the test email, right, it makes sure that it simply gives you an idea that your email account that you have just added is working. I will go ahead and add one more email account. So I'll give you the answer to your question basically. So I'm adding this admin at yourstore.com. I will simply copy it, this one, which is here. So this is how we add an email account basically, right? And once I have email, let's say we have a multiple email accounts and we want to configure different accounts for different type of emails. So we simply go to the content management and then we go to the message templates. So message templates in nopCommerce are the email templates actually, right? And once you go to the message templates, you have all different type of templates. For example, for the customer welcome, you want to use a different email. Right. So we go to the customer welcome message template, edit it, and then we can simply choose the email account that the customer welcome should go from admin@yourstore.com, right? And then I'll click on save. So this customer welcome message email will go from that email account. And similarly, for the new order, right, you can simply choose that the relevant email address in under, let's say, order place customer notification, right? So if you want to use a different email. For example, order place customer notification, simply choose this email, right, and click on save. So this order place customer notification will go from that new email address that we have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure does. You want to go ahead and take another question? I'll say we take two more questions and then we can wrap things up. Tell you what, I'll go ahead and share my screen again.
Yeah.
Okay, and let me copy over the question. All right, so when it comes to multiple stores, if I wanted to launch 4 different stores, is it okay to install NOP 4 times as different websites, different domain names on the same server? So I can uniquely control themes, email templates, admins, and so on. So this overall approach, do you have any comment on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you want to have 4 different stores with different domain names on the same server, of course you can do that. I think our server where we have the our nopCommerce, our NopAdvance website, it is based on nopCommerce, and we have some separate websites for each theme demos. So all of them are the separate installations of nopCommerce. So yes, of course you can have different stores, I mean different websites on the same server with different domain names. But if you want to handle everything under one roof, under one admin panel, you can have multi-store setup in nopCommerce. It's pretty good. But with the multiple stores, you need to have that sort of resources available in your server. For example, you will need more RAM, more CPU, and the more disk or the sufficient disk space in your system to have the multi-store websites running smoothly.
So what if those multiple stores really kind of have the same level of traffic, even in other words, instead of one big store, you have the multiple stores. When it comes to behind the scenes, if you utilize one instance of nopCommerce, could you easily control, a separate theme per that store, separate email templates, and so on per that store within the, or really multiple domains within that one
Yes.
instance?
Yes, so when you have multiple stores in your website, so for each store you can you can configure different themes for each store, right? And so they will be totally unique. They will not be look-alike, right? And you can have separate email templates per store. Right, but the admin interface will be same for all of the stores, and the customers are always shared across all the stores. So for example, you have 4 stores, so the customer who is registered in store 1 will also be accessible in the store 4.
Okay, and that all makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, I'm
So
gonna throw one.
there is one
That's,
more thing.
yeah.
There is one more thing. So when you run the nopCommerce on a multi-store setup, and you have a huge amount of traffic on each of the stores, then it is not recommended to use the multiple stores in a single installation, because there is a capacity that your IS instance can handle, if unless and until you have a load balancing kind of thing set up.
Right. Yeah, there might be that kind of just performance need where you want those separate stores.
Yes,
That does make sense.
yes.
So this question came in just at the end, but it's really more of a clarification for that email question that was initially put into the chat. And that is, when it comes to like hosting your own email service, I mean, is it really something, I wouldn't think you necessarily want to install Exchange Server per se, but you probably are going to have to deal with some kind of third-party service to handle your email, unless you truly want to host it yourself. Would you agree with that, or do you have any comment on that, on this question about email?
So I think, yeah, I mean, if you need a email exchange server, I think you can buy it from a third party web, or you can install it on a separate installation of server. I think that doesn't relate anywhere with the nopCommerce email configurations.
Okay. And that makes
Yep.
sense. I think it's
Yep.
more so general how to manage email. All right, I keep seeing more questions come in, so I'm gonna keep putting a few more in here, and we'll call it here in a few. Is it a good idea to go with free SSL, or should we go with paid SSL from day one?
Yes. So free SSL, obviously, free SSL have a bad effect on your SEO, because many search engines like Google, Bing, they they check for the SSL, they check for your SSL provider, and when they see this Let's Encrypt and other free SSL providers, so they simply downvote your SSL is your SSL rankings for your website, because these SSLs are good to have an SSL certificate, but they are not recommended by Google or Bing.
Gotcha. All right, great point. All right, I keep seeing some questions come in, so they're hard to say no to on answering. Uh, Here's an added question of based on the multi-store question, if you have lots of traffic, can you have multiple installs of NOP matching a single DB and backend, or do you need to look at load balancing in Azure?
So it's always good advice to look at the load balancing servers. So your servers, whether it is in Azure or it's a VPS or a dedicated server. So if you have a lot of traffic, I will always advise to use load balancing. Right. And yes, of course, you can use the multiple instances of nopCommerce with a single database. Right. So basically, you create multiple stores for each nopCommerce instance and use the same database. So that way, the IIS will see it as different installations of Nop, and you are still using multiple, multi-store functionality, right? And that way you divide the traffic within multiple instances of the nopCommerce websites in IIS. So that's a pretty complex installation, which all of us do not do. But yes, we have done this earlier for a few of our customers who had a lot of problems when they switched to the multiple store. So just to solve their problem, we kept the same multi-store thing as it is, and we set up the second instance of nopCommerce, their website, on the IIS. So this divided the users, the traffic among those two instances, and that gave us a good go ahead with the solution.
I gotcha, just a natural failover. And have you also found the need to, let's say, implement the caching side of thing like Redis, whatnot?
So yeah, the cachings, I think we we have Redis cache, right? We have a lot of other cachings, third party caching services. I think Cloudflare is the best I have found, because many of my customers uses Cloudflare, and it is really good with the nopCommerce, right? And we can have for the image caching, because images are the biggest thing in an e-commerce website. The content does not takes a lot of time. The main thing is image, CSS, and the JavaScript, right? And your HTML specifically. So for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, we have these settings in the nopCommerce that I showed during the installation uh, while doing the configuration. But for the images, we don't have anything in the nopCommerce. So for the images, you can use something like Cloudflare, or you can also use some third-party websites for the images. We used to use a third-party website for the images. I exactly don't remember the name of that service. That was pretty good. Let me just try to find out. Meanwhile, we can look on the other questions as well.
Yeah, you could just share that later. But I was gonna say, yeah, why don't we just do one more and then we'll wrap this up. And this is kind of like I've actually heard this question a couple times in general, and it's specifically this: when it comes to nopCommerce versus Magento. Of
Yes.
course, being
So
a .NET developer, I have my biased opinions, but I'd love to hear from you on how you address that with customers.
yeah. So okay. So I found that website regarding the image caching. So the
Okay.
website is imagekit.io.
Image.
Kit .io. Right. So
Okay.
these guys provide a very good image caching technique, and we use it for some of our customers for their nopCommerce website. This is pretty good. Right. So the
Okay.
next question is how to convince a client to choose Nop over Magento. Wow. So I mean, this is a sales question, and this is good. I have a good sales technique. So, to answer this question, we need to understand that we do not sell nopCommerce or Magento to a customer. We sell the solution to a customer, and if you show the benefits of nopCommerce, right, of course the customer will listen to you, and if someone shows the benefits of Magento, right, they will listen to them. But in my view, because many of my friends have their own company who works dedicatedly on Magento, similar to we work dedicatedly on nopCommerce only. So compared to them, let's say something requires 20 hours of development in Magento. I think that can be done in within 14 to 15 hours in nopCommerce. So this is a difference in terms of how much time you save and the money you save uh, when comparing to nopCommerce and Magento. Magento has a PHP, is a PHP thing and can run on Linux. nopCommerce is a .NET Core thing, can run on Linux and on Windows as well. So the security is actually about firewall. So how you configure it on Linux and Windows. So Windows servers now comes with a lot of, you know, a lot much, security enhancement compared to the previous versions of Windows. So it's very, confusing when you answer someone about comparing nopCommerce and Magento. In my view, so it's always you sell the solution to a customer, not the platform, because I can sell someone nopCommerce over Umbraco is a very good CMS platform, but if customers comes to me, I think I can sell nopCommerce over Umbraco to them.
Makes sense. I mean, it really does come down to what kind of developers you have supporting that particular platform. And that's why it's important to understand the different stacks of what those preferences are. All right. So yeah, I think we'll wrap it up. And thanks, Atul. I thought that was great doing that walkthrough and
Thank you so much.
how that worked. Let me just go ahead and wrap things up by, let's see, I'm just going to share the last slide here. So again, if you're interested in speaking, just like Atul did here on the main presentation, and like I did with the 15-minute lightning talk, feel free to reach out to me, John at nopacademy.com. And again, this is technical and non-technical talks. And if you want to sponsor, of course, reach out to me as well. This recording, I will be downloading the recording and possibly splitting it where we had the lightning talk separate from Atul's talk. But either way, either it's going to be the entire recording or both recordings will be up on the nopCommerce YouTube channel. So I'll send these videos over to the nopCommerce team and they'll post them out there. And yes, if you have someone out there has more to say about nopCommerce, feel free to reach out to me. I have been lining up a few other talks, more technical talks, but even though they do pertain to .NET developers, they're not really nopCommerce specific. So I'm really wanting to get more talks that are heavily focused around, again, nopCommerce, whether it's technical or non-technical, and maybe some aspects of SEO and things like that. But yeah, that's it. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you the third Tuesday of next month. And thanks, Atul. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, John, and thank you everyone for hearing out on this presentation. I hope everyone liked it. thank you for, and you can leave comments on this. All right. And thank you, everyone. Thank you so much and have a good day ahead.
All right. Thank you. Take care. Take care.